Hello and welcome back to the Grace-Filled Leader podcast. In our last episode, we introduced the Enneagram and its 3 triads. Well, today we're going to take a deep dive into the Instinctive Triad, also known as the Gut Triad, and explore types 8, 9, and 1 in a little bit greater detail. So if you're ready to understand more about what drives your behavior and how to grow in your personal and professional life, stay tuned. Welcome to the Grace-Filled Leader podcast. Do you want better work-life balance? Do you get stuck in patterns of perfectionism and people-pleasing? Have you always been an overachiever but never really felt good enough, no matter how much outward success you achieve? Do you want more time for the things that matter most? Well, you are in the right place. Here on the Grace-Filled Leader podcast, we focus on spirit-driven success and share the secrets to having better work-life balance as a busy woman in leadership. Here you will learn how to set boundaries like a boss, find peace of mind, and reclaim your time for the things that matter most. Hi, I'm Tanya, a wife, mom, leader, and certified Christian life coach. For most of my life, I tried to find worthiness through achievement. I spent decades people-pleasing and pouring myself into my work. I was looking for my value through the approval of others. This led me to feel burned out, empty, and exhausted. I had no time or energy for myself or my family. I realized that I was wasting time and energy looking for validation in all the wrong places. But my life changed when I finally surrendered and God showed me a different way. It is my mission to help you start living the abundant life God has for you. If you're ready to become fueled by grace and find freedom from people-pleasing, if you're ready to multiply your time and impact as a Christian woman in leadership, this podcast is for you. Roll up your sleeves, sister friends. It's time to get after it. Now, before we dive into the Instinctive Triad, I want to share a perspective about the Enneagram, and I'm probably going to repeat this perspective throughout our Enneagram series this month. What we don't know about ourselves can ultimately hurt us and those around us. Working with the Enneagram allows us to develop the self-awareness that helps us understand who we are and why we perceive and relate to the world the way that we do. The reality is, our wounds of the past and the beliefs that we'd formed shape the way that we see and respond to our circumstances. If we don't develop an understanding of our history and our responses to it, we will ultimately be prisoners to it, blindly making the same mistakes and coping in the same ways we always have. Once we learn how and why we see and respond to the world the way that we do, we can be more intentional about getting out of our own way, and we can listen to the Holy Spirit's call to become more of the person that God created us to be. So now, on to the Instinctive Triad of the Enneagram. The Instinctive Triad consists of types 8, 9, and 1. And again, we're talking about the Enneagram. These types are primarily driven by their gut instincts and their need for control. People in this triad often struggle with anger and how they express it or repress it. Each type has its unique way of dealing with anger and their environment. So let's explore each of these 3 types in some detail. So first we have type 8, also known as the Challenger. Challengers are very strong, assertive, and resourceful individuals who value control and independence. Some of their core characteristics are that they're confident, decisive, and protective. They have a natural ability to take charge, and they're not afraid to confront issues head on. If any of you know my husband, I'm pretty certain he is a Enneagram type 8. Type 8s value strength and resilience, both in themselves and others. So when the Challenger is under stress, they become more confrontational and domineering. They might even lash out and become excessively controlling, fearing vulnerability and weakness. So they do not want to appear vulnerable or weak. So they will overcompensate by being excessively domineering and controlling. Now, when a challenger is secure and more in balance, they become a bit more open-hearted and magnanimous. They use their strength to protect and to support others, which makes them become inspiring leaders who really seek to empower those around them. Now, some tips for the challenger to grow and develop into their more healthy version of their type is first to learn to practice some vulnerability. So allow yourself to be vulnerable with trusted people. It's okay to show some weaknesses and ask for help. And this is difficult for challengers, but they may learn that when they do this, they actually build trust with others in relationships. A second tip for growth and development for the challenger is to develop a sense of empathy, to work on understanding or at least even considering others' perspectives and feelings. This can soften their approach and enhance relationships. And number 3, a third tip for growth for the challenger is to balance control. In other words, learn how to delegate and trust others' abilities. This can reduce your stress if you are a type 8, and it can foster a more collaborative environment. A less balanced type 8 will really struggle with delegating and giving up control. Many times they might be seen as the micromanager. Now moving on to type 8 in the gut triad or the instinctive triad. Type 9. Did I say type 9? Anyway, type 9 is the peacemaker. The peacemaker is typically somewhat easygoing, very supportive, and individuals who seek harmony in both inner and outer peace. So they really struggle with the thought of there being any kind of conflict, and they seek to make peace both within themselves and with others. Some of the core characteristics are that peacemakers are accepting and trusting, and they're a stable force or presence with those around them. They strive to avoid conflict, as I said, and create harmony in their environment. They are often seen as easygoing and accommodating, sometimes to the point of neglecting their own needs. And when under stress, peacemakers can become passive-aggressive and somewhat disengaged. They may withdraw and become complacent, avoiding conflicts and suppressing their own desires. When they're more secure and in a balanced state, peacemakers become a bit more assertive and proactive. They effectively balance both their needs with those of others, which fosters really true harmony through healthy boundaries and active engagement. So some tips for the peacemaker or type 9 to further grow and develop themselves personally and professionally is, number 1, learn how to assert yourself. Practice speaking up for your needs and your opinions. Your voice is important and it deserves to be heard. Number 2, learn to set boundaries. Learn how to say no and establish clear boundaries. This helps maintain your peace without compromising your well-being or even compromising your sense of integrity and supportiveness with others. And the third tip for the peacemaker is to engage actively, to stay present and actively participate in your life. Avoid withdrawing, isolating, and make conscious choices that align with your values. So I told you on the last episode that when I take the Enneagram assessment, I come out as a type 9 or a peacemaker. And so all of these characteristics and tips really do resonate with me. So I think that it's probably a pretty accurate assessment. Now we have type 1 in the gut or instinctive triad. Type 1 on the Enneagram is referred to as the reformer. Reformers are very principled and purposeful, and they're very self-controlled. they tend to strive for perfection. So some of their core characteristics are that they are conscientious, responsible, and improvement-oriented. They have a strong sense of right and wrong, and they're driven to make the world a better place. As I said, they're often perfectionists who set very high standards for themselves and for others. When they're under stress, reformers can become overly critical and very rigid. They might even fixate on the imperfections and become judgmental, both toward themselves and toward others. So if you have those in your lives that you consider being very judgy, they might be this type 1 reformer on the Enneagram. Now, when reformers are secure and in a more balanced state, they become more forgiving and open-minded. They might do a better job of embracing some imperfections and focus on positive change through acceptance and understanding. Some tips for you if you are a type 1 or for others who are type 1s to grow and develop in a healthy way within your type. Number 1, embrace imperfections. Accept that imperfection is a part of life. Practice self-compassion and recognize the value in making mistakes. The second tip is learn how to relax and enjoy. Enjoy life without constantly striving for perfection. Get engaged in activities that bring you joy and relaxation. And the third tip is to cultivate flexibility. Be open to different perspectives and approaches. Flexibility can lead to more innovative and effective solutions. So really learning to be less rigid as a type 1. So I'm going to review those characteristics and tips a little bit more briefly again. Now remember, this is the instinctive or the gut triad of the Enneagram. Now, this is a pretty simplistic breakdown, and we all have a type, and then we have what are called wings, which under certain situations, we might look more like the type that is on one side or the other side of us on the Enneagram. So for example, type 8, the challenger, or let's go with type 9. So I'm going to take my own type. Type 9, the peacemaker, might at times either look somewhat like or take on the characteristics of type 8, the challenger. So they may come out as strong and purposeful leaders, or they may tend kind of from a subordinate standpoint. There's characteristics of a type 1 in a type 9 or a type 8. So while your dominant type might be a type 9, you'll have characteristics that might show up a little bit like either a type 1 or a type 8. And that would be considered your wing. So for example, I tend to be more of a type 9 wing 1 sort of person. Anyway, we'll talk about that a little bit more in the future. But just to review, the gut triad consists of 3 types. And if you remember from last episode, we talk about the dominant emotion that drives each type or that they struggle with. And one type will tend to express that emotion. One type will try to repress that emotion. And one type will typically try to avoid that emotion. So for the instinctive triad, the gut triad, the dominant emotion that they struggle with is anger. So type 8, the challenger, will be expressive of anger. Type 9 will be repressive of anger. And type 1 will sort of try to avoid anger through perfectionism. So again, type 8 is the challenger. The challenger is confident, strong, assertive. Under stress, they become more confrontational and domineering, and they may very much lash out and express their anger. Tips for growth and development of the challenger is to practice vulnerability, develop empathy, and to learn how to balance control. So learning how to delegate and not seek to control everything. The second type in the instinctive triad is the peacemaker. The peacemakers are supportive and harmonious, and they seek harmony inwardly and outwardly. Under stress, peacemakers can sort of repress their anger and become passive-aggressive and disengaged. And tips for growth and development as a peacemaker is to learn how to assert yourself, set boundaries, and engage actively in life. And finally, type 1, the reformer, are the principled, purposeful, and perfectionistic folks. When under stress, they become overly critical and rigid. Tips for growth and development for the type 1 reformer are to, number 1, embrace imperfections. Number 2, learn how to relax and enjoy life. And number 3, learn how to cultivate some flexibility. So I hope that this deep dive into the instinctive triad has given you a few valuable insights into types 8, 9, and 1. And you may or may not hear some characteristics that resonate with you in these types. Remember, there are still 6 more types in the Enneagram. Understanding these different types can really help you recognize your own patterns of behaviors and thoughts and those of others, which help to foster, or certainly can help to foster, better relationships and personal growth. The more aware you are, the more potential you have to harness both the strengths within your type and to learn how to develop and be aware of the blind spots that may exist when you're in a more unhealthy place in certain types. So remember, the goal is not to put ourselves in a box, but just to use this knowledge as a tool for self-awareness and development. And in our next episode, we're going to explore the feeling triad and dive into types 2, 3, and 4. So if you're enjoying this series on the Enneagram, be sure to follow the show and please consider leaving a written review. Even if it's 2 words, leaving a review really helps other people find the show. It's a whole algorithm thing. So it really is very helpful to me and to other listeners in finding the show. If you would be so kind to take a minute to leave some feedback to help us grow and reach more listeners. If you want even more in-depth exploration of the Enneagram and how to personally apply it to your life and leadership, I encourage you to consider booking a free consult with me at gracefilledleader.com/work with me. And now, as always, my friends, I pray that the Lord fills you with gratitude, peace, and His amazing grace. I pray this episode blessed you, spoke to you, or encouraged you in some way. If so, please share it with a friend and head on over to Apple Podcasts to leave me a review. That's the only way for me to know if you're enjoying the show. Nothing blesses me more than to hear from you. Also, come on over to our free Facebook community. This is a great place for us to support one another on our faith and leadership journeys. You can find the link to the group in the show notes or go to gracefilledleader.com/community. If you have questions or content ideas for the show, please send me a message on SpeakPipe or via email. Go to gracefilledleader.com/contact and leave a written or voice recorded message. I would love to know how I can best serve you on the podcast. Now to Him who can do immeasurably more than we can ask or imagine, according to His power that is at work within us. Ephesians 3, verse 20. Until next time, my friends, God bless.